Welcome to Driven by Dreamz. Today, I'm thrilled to speak with Lina Taylor, a two-time Olympian, award-winning sustainability leader, and executive coach to some of the world's most influential organizations. From overcoming a challenging start in Bulgaria to competing on the global stage and advising leaders at Amazon, Google, and the International Olympic Committee, Lina's journey is nothing short of inspiring. She brings a rare blend of elite athletic discipline, scientific expertise, and deep purpose to her work in leadership and impact. Get ready for a conversation about resilience, purpose-driven growth, and creating real change. Hi, Lina. It's an honor to have you here.
Very nice to see you too, Anishka. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you.
So before we dive into the deeper part of our conversation, I'd love to start with a few rapid-fire questions to get to know you on a more personal level. Just say the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
So, what Olympic moment or sports moment gives you goosebumps every time?
Oh gosh, I have this play with my sister. We were in the 2004 Olympics in Athens and we were playing the Brazilians. They were the reigning world champions. And we had this amazing rally where, we were going back and forth, but we end up winning it. And then I remember just looking at her and going, we can do this. And then we looked in the stadium, we saw our parents waving the flag, and it was just a moment that I'll always remember.
That's amazing. You played with your sister?
I did, yes, with my younger sister. She's 3 years younger than me.
Oh, my sister's also 3 years younger.
Ah, we have a lot in common.
What's one habit from your athlete days that you still use in your daily routine?
Well, there are many, but on a daily basis, I would say going to bed early, getting up early. That's one of my things that I do that's very consistent. Another thing is to always kind of do something physical. Obviously, with sports, that's what you want to do. But even now, I'm not playing at the elite level, but I want to do something physical and just kind of that gets me in the right mindset too.
What's one leadership lesson that stuck with you over the years?
Whenever things get hard, look inside yourself and find your superpower. That hard moment that we're experiencing in this moment right now is there for a reason. And if you lean into it and ask the question, what capacity do I have to develop to help me overcome this obstacle? That has served me very well.
One Bulgarian tradition you wish more people knew about?
Oh, I love our 1st of March. We celebrate the coming spring, with red and white ribbons that we tie on trees. And it's just a way to connect with nature and starting something new. Spring is coming, it's a new beginning. And so I wish that everybody was doing that.
It's pretty cool. What's your go-to mindset reset when you're under pressure?
When I'm under pressure, pause.
Mountains or ocean when you need a recharge?
Mountains, for sure.
A quote you turn to when you're facing a tough decision?
That's a good one. If it had to be a quote from someone else, it'd probably be, excellence is not an act, but a habit. Can I do this over and over again?
And lastly, what's your superpower?
Perseverance, reinvention, resilience.
Well, I love those answers, so thank you for that glimpse into your world. Now let's dig into your leadership journey. So you've had such a multifaceted career, from Olympian to scientist to global executive coach. So what personal value has guided you through each of these transitions?
It probably is the resilience, I have to say, because I discovered it as a superpower within myself. And then as I started telling my story and started to work with other people, I found that all of us need personal resilience almost on a daily basis. And so looking into the lessons that I learned from my journey, I was able to distill a way that makes sense to people, little steps. It wasn't a miraculous something that happened, but it was just small choices that I made in the moment that helped me.
So what led to each of those transitions?
Well, it started early in volleyball when I was growing up in Bulgaria. I was cut from my team when I was 16 years old. But it wasn't something that I was willing to let go of so easily because it meant that the rest of my life wouldn't unfold the way that I had envisioned it. I had dedicated myself to being an athlete and starting at a young age, at the age of 8. So for half of my life, I was living with that vision, and then all of a sudden, the new coach that we had came in and cut me from the team without even seeing me play. Not only did I feel that was unfair, but I felt like all of my dreams had crashed in that moment. And after a long night of crying at home, I decided the next morning that I would go back to my team and to my practice and face the coach again. And that decision was really pivotal for the rest of my life because it informed all the different choices and hardships that I would face along the way and how I would deal with them.
That's amazing how you went back and fought for what you believed was right. What led from becoming an Olympian to where you are right now?
That's a great question too, and I think one of the realizations that I had, especially when being faced with difficulties, is that those tough moments also allow us to find courage in the moment. And so, going from stopping to play elite sports was a very difficult transition because that's what I had been and I had envisioned myself. My whole identity was wrapped into it. And when I transitioned into being a mom and staying at home, it was a very different environment. I went from the global stage to now just being with my little babies. And that was great and wonderful and a discovery process in many different ways, but it was also a different identity that I had to find for myself. And then as the years went on and the kids didn't need me as much, I started asking myself the question, what do I want to do next? And I discovered that I have a lot to offer, that going to my story has a lot of lessons that people can relate to. And that led me to do a lot of different presentations for companies and becoming an executive coach. And now I have the privilege and really the pleasure of working with some of the biggest companies in the world and helping them shape their global strategies.
So what lessons from elite sport have shaped the way you approach leadership and coaching today?
Elite sports is a very narrow field. However, what makes elite athletes successful are the same things that make some entrepreneurs successful and others not. It's not just luck, it's how you approach the challenges that you meet along the way. Everyone has challenges. It's not like the red carpet just rolls open. So it really is, again, resilience. Can you accept what you can't control? Can you take responsibility for the things that you can control? Do you know what really matters to you so that in those tough moments you can go to that place and find courage to reimagine another outcome? And then do you have the willingness to recommit to what matters to you? That's another thing, that people always want something to happen and to unfold for them, but oftentimes it comes to having the willingness to do the hard things.
Thanks for sharing that. As an athlete, you must have faced a lot of struggles, physically, mentally. How did you overcome those?
We are emotional beings, so we're always going to have these emotions that arise. And what people sometimes don't understand is that we don't have control over our emotions, but what we do have control over is once we experience an emotion, the thought goes through our prefrontal cortex, and this is where we actually have a way to choose a response to that emotion. So I've always had the ability, even when I was a little kid, to separate the two. The emotion that I'm experiencing, I may be really mad or upset or angry or frustrated at something, but then how do I respond to that situation? There is a space between those two. And if you give yourself a chance to, take a deep breath, pause, like I said, then you can ask yourself the question, how do I want to show up in this situation? what do I want to become through this hardship that I'm feeling right now? And then you can come up with a way to respond that maybe is different than the initial impulse that you had based on the emotion.
Well, that must be really helpful to keep you from making rash decisions, right?
Exactly.
How do you explain that to others so that they also have that pause where they stop and think before making any decisions?
Well, number one, I think we all have to have compassion. Compassion for ourselves, compassion for other people that are around us, because we're all made of the same kind of fibers. So we all have these emotions that we'll experience. And again, if we start with that compassion, so if I cultivate that on a daily basis through little things. So for example, if I catch myself having a thought that's negative towards myself or towards another person, the moment when I can say to myself, take a step back, take a breath, and ask, is this true? Is it true if I'm telling myself a negative message like, you can't do this, you don't have time, you're not good enough, you don't have the skills? Is that really true? And then ask another question, well, what would I need to do to make this happen? And this is how we take our circumstances, which a lot of times we don't control, right? What our circumstances are, what families we're born in, what countries we're born in, what hardships we have along the way. But then we have a chance to engineer, or what I used to say is reimagine another response that pushes us into the life that we want for ourselves. And that's really what I learned from sports. It's like you're going to have calls from the referees that don't go in your favor. You're going to have plays that you designed but didn't go well. Maybe you made a mistake, your partner made a mistake. Maybe the opposition had a very strong play. If you have that compassion and acceptance in the very first moment, then you can create the space that you need to reimagine and re-engineer a response that puts you in the situation that you want to be in.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Lina. I know a lot of the entrepreneurs I've talked to, they've said sports is very similar to entrepreneurship for that same reason that you need to have that sportsmanship, you need to have that willingness to never give up. So could you share an example of your entrepreneurial journey that was like that, where you had to draw on those skills?
It happens all the time, trust me. Being in business for myself, I don't always get the yes that I want to hear. I don't always hear back from the people that I reach out to. That can really put me in a situation where I'm looking at and start questioning myself, well, do they really see the value in what I have to offer? And I have to do this every day, even now, after I've been doing it for so long, I have to go back to what really matters to me, to know that I don't control how someone will respond to what I say or what I do. They have a choice in the matter too. But still, does that define me? Does this response from the other person or the situation, is that a defining moment for me? And the answer oftentimes is not. So how I choose to show up is how I defined who I am and what the opportunities are. But it's not always easy. You have to have that compassion. You have to take a step back. If you're upset sometimes, you have to do that self-soothing, self-care. I always go to, am I getting enough sleep? Am I having good nutrition? Am I doing enough exercise? And do I have joy in my life? Like, that's another big thing is, do I do things that really make me happy or make other people happy?
It's a great way to think about it. You mentioned being an athlete was your dream since you were 8. Was that mindset there from when you started, or did you have to work harder to develop it?
Oh, it was really hard when I was starting. Sports is hard. I mean, it's fun when you're looking at it, but when you try to play and things don't go your way, and you have a coach that's really pushing you past your limits. I remember struggling a lot when I was a kid. To make my body, my physical body, do the things that were required of me was a lot of hard work, and a lot of times I didn't want to do it. And so I had my days, and I think always when it came to it, I had to ask myself this question, what do I really want? And if it was to make that team or to win that championship, then the next question is, well, what are you willing to do about it? And when you put it in that perspective, you realize that the hardship in doing it is actually less than giving up on your dream, if that is your dream. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I know a lot of people have goals, but they don't take the steps to meet them. So asking those questions would really help you reflect on what you need to do to make this possible.
Yeah. And a lot of times, people think you have to have all the answers, even in the corporate world where you're dealing with executives at a very high level. Especially there, we think we have to have all the answers. You can't show up not knowing why. But some of the wisest people that I know and what I do in my executive coaching is that you have to ask the right questions. So this is really interesting because, we're always taught, come up with an answer. When you have a test, you have to know the answer. But what's even more valuable than having an answer is asking the right question and then having the patience to let that unfold in the way that is even beyond your imagination.
Well, you mentioned that you coach high-performing leaders. How do you help them build resilience without burning out?
Oh, that's on everybody's mind. Burnout is a very real thing and everybody deals with it, especially now at a time when a lot of companies are shrinking their resources and they're asking people to do more with less resources. And so sometimes, people find themselves in situations where they're working long days and they don't have any vacation in sight. And in those moments, what I would say is it's really important to find, just like, a mother with 3 kids, your days are hours and hours and hours, and oftentimes it's way more than 14 hours long days that you have to be on, you have to be doing things. And what I found in those situations is that rather than waiting for a big payout at the end, right, rather than waiting for the weekend or rather than waiting for a vacation that you can take, it's much more valuable and you would have a lot more energy if you found small moments, even within the hour or within the day, to break it down into just small moments like that, where you give yourself a chance to pause, to do maybe a very short meditation. And we have so many resources now. There are some fabulous meditations that you can do for just 3 minutes, and that recharges you. Take a small little walk around the block. Those are the kind of habits that I think sustain us in the long term, and they don't bring us to the brink of burnout.
I know there's a lot of pressure and competition in today's world. So burnout, you're right, is very serious. So thank you so much for telling us how we can deal with it. What does a purpose-driven strategy look like in practical terms for a company under intense pressure to deliver results?
So it's interesting because this question of purpose sometimes could be seen as an add-on, nice to have on top of the bottom line results. But what I've noticed with some of the most successful companies over time is that when they connect their bottom line to what their purpose in the world is, and if you think about most people, that's how they find meaning in their lives. Well, the same for the company, that when the bottom line results are connected to something bigger that it's delivering for their employees, for their customers, for the whole ecosystem of where they live in and function, that's when long-term success is found. And oftentimes, I think we're too focused on measuring success in very short-term intervals. For example, in public companies where it's a stock corporation, they have to deliver these quarterly results. Well, oftentimes you have to make decisions that go way beyond 3 months or 4 months of performance, and you have to think about changing systematic approaches that take, a year, 2 years, sometimes even 5 years. So it may look like you're not getting the returns that you need, but in the long term, you will be more successful. And so here's a very practical tip that I would say to anyone. When you find that your results get in the way of your higher purpose, ask yourself the question, am I measuring too frequently? Am I not looking at, it's just like an athlete. If I'm trying to develop a certain amount of strength, in the first few weeks of my training regimen, I may actually decrease the strength that I have because I'm putting myself under a lot of pressure and a lot of output. But over the long run, I'll be able to rebound from that, and I will be able to have that strength that I have been putting the work into developing. So it's the same thing with businesses. If you see that your short-term results are getting in the way of the purpose, then maybe reconsider how often you're measuring and what are the types of measurements that you're taking.
Well, that's a great example and helps it make a lot more sense. So you've been honored with the IOC Climate Action Award. What does true climate leadership look like within organizations today?
It's very much connected to purpose. I think what we forget sometimes is that competition is not the end of all things, and that we all can prosper more through cooperation and through uplifting not just our internal ecosystem, but also when we look at our communities, for example, where a company is functioning. If you're thinking about uplifting that community, you will have a lot better results in the long term as well. And I think that's what, when you use the word climate, it's kind of like a big idea and it doesn't feel very relevant to what we're doing each day. However, when you think about how, is this decision that I'm making today, is that benefiting me, my immediate circle around me, the larger circle around them? And if the answer is yes, and it's not detracting from a certain community or a certain resource, then you're probably on the right path. But if it is, then you have to reconsider because it's not going to be sustainable in the long term.
The first thing I thought of when you said competition and cooperation was that in sports, a lot of people think it's only competition. But as you mentioned, playing with your sister, it also requires a lot of cooperation there, being able to be in sync with someone, right?
Well, not just that, but I'll tell you, you can ask any elite athlete that has performed at that level, that some of the most memorable moments, some of the best matches that we play, we are in sync with our competition. And, that's when you see, someone going across the net or hugging the opponent, because we know that when we're playing at our best, when my opponent is playing at their best and I'm playing at my best, we're pushing each other to ever higher levels. And in that moment, you realize that we're not competing against each other. We're actually helping each other grow in ways that we couldn't do on our own.
That's an amazing way to put it. Thank you. And thank you so much for this conversation today, Lina. I've learned a lot, really, and I'm sure our audience has drawn a lot from it too, so thanks. Do you have any final words of wisdom before we wrap this up?
Thank you, Anishka. And I think for everyone, especially now, just to think about really honing in on your superpower. And how you do that is when something challenging is happening, your initial reaction may be, no, I don't want this to happen. But your second thought, you can train yourself to ask the question, what capacity is this challenge inviting me to develop that could become my superpower?
Well, thank you so much, Lina.
Thank you, Anishka. Great to see you.